The funeral service of the Crown Gospel Music Awards founder, Zanele Mbokazi-Nkambule, is currently underway at the Durban International Conference Centre. The newly elected Johannesburg Mayor, Dada Morero, says he is committed to ensuring that the delivery of basic services in the city is accelerated. The Benchmarks Foundation says it is disappointing to see that over a decade after mine workers were killed for demanding an increase in wages and conditions in Marikana near Rustenburg in the northwest have not changed. It's just gone 12 noon Central African time. A very good afternoon to you and welcome to the Week in Review right here on the SABC News Channel 404. We are coming to you live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, and we are ready to review some of the week's biggest stories today. I am Zanele Mbokazi-Nkambule and we invite you to join the conversation. Give us a ring, will you? Our studio line is 011-714-0680, 0681 or 0682. Good to be with you. Welcome. We start here this afternoon. The funeral service of the Crown Gospel Music Awards founder, Zanele Mbokazi-Nkambule, is currently underway at the Durban International Conference Centre today. Mbokazi-Nkambule died at a Durban hospital earlier this week after a battle with lung cancer. She was also the host of the popular gospel show Eshilo on Ukhozi FM. Mbokazi-Nkambule has been described as a visionary and multi-talented person who was willing to develop young people and upcoming gospel artists. The newly elected Johannesburg Mayor, Dada Morero, says he's committed to ensuring that the delivery of basic services in the city is accelerated. He was delivering his acceptance speech following his election as mayor last night. Morero, who is ANC's regional leader, was up against the DA's Belinda Kaiser Eche Ozonjoku. Morero is the city's 10th mayor since 2016 and was elected after the resignation of Al-Jamar's party, Al-Jamar's Kabelo Kwamanda.
Christians, please.
South Africa's economic hub electing a 9th mayor in a space of 5 years. Former Mayor Kabelo Kwamanda is the latest to vacate the mayoral seat after he resigned due to mounting pressure. Council nominated 2 councillors, Belinda Kaiser Ozonjoku, a DA caucus leader in Johannesburg, squared off versus Finance MMC and Johannesburg ANC Chair Councillor Sillo Enoch Dada Morero.
Total valid votes were 249. There was 1 cancelled ballot, and all the party agents signed. The results are as follows. Councillor Belinda Cynthia Ozonjoku is 60. Councillor Sillo Enoch. Councillor Sillo Enoch Morero is 189.
DA unsuccessfully tried to field their caucus leader when their attempts to dissolve the special council seating to elect mayor failed.
Councillor Belinda, do you accept the nomination? Councillors, please, I'm asking.
Madam Speaker, I accept the nomination.
Thank you.
The mayorship of Joburg has seen a revolving door where 8 mayors have been elected in this one term. Infrastructure challenges, including burst water pipes, accumulating trash, deteriorating roads and unreliable electricity, prompted the NGOs and political parties in council to push for Kabelo Kwamanda's axing. Morero was voted in unanimously with coalition parties and Action SA voting in favor.
Let us pause and reset. Reset does not mean we start from scratch. It means we acknowledge our mistakes and we must apologize where we have failed the people of Johannesburg. It also means that we must celebrate our good story, and indeed, we do have a good story to tell.
Morero used the opportune moment to announce members of his mayoral committee.
Community Development, Councillor Kabelo Kwamanda. Development planning, Councillor UNISA Mgcina. Economic Development, Councillor Nomoya Mnisi. Environment, Infrastructure and Service Delivery, Councillor Jack Squaila. Group Corporate and Shared Services, Councillor Loiso Masuku. Group Finance, Councillor Margaret Arnolds. Health and Social Development, Councillor Eni Makafula. Human Settlement, Councillor Mlungisi Mabaso. Public Safety, Councillor Mgcini Chwaku. Transport, Councillor Kenny Kunene.
Offenses Timo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, the legal representatives of the widows of the slain Marikana miners say government has not resolved several claims related to the Marikana massacre. This follows a statement by Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Thembi Smelane, that more than 350 million rands has been paid out in claims related to the Marikana massacre. Mine workers and AMCU supporters converged at the infamous Kopi for the 12th Marikana massacre commemoration held in Marikana near Rustenburg in the northwest. AMCU President Joseph Matunjwa says while there may be advancements in living wages of mine workers, many more gains can be attained only through solidarity among trade unions. Thank you for staying with us. To this now, the Economic Freedom Fighters Deputy President Floyd Shivambu has resigned from the party. He will now don the regalia of the Umkhonto weSizwe party of former President Jacob Zuma. Speaking at the EFF's media conference, party leader Julius Malema said members must brace themselves for more high-profile resignations.
The political tectonic plates are shifting in the Economic Freedom Fighters Party. Its Deputy President, Floyd Shivambu, has left the Red Berets in an unexpected turn of events. He drafted a letter to party leader Julius Malema explaining that he will not be renewing his party membership.
Greetings, Comrade President. The chairperson of Ward 44, Johannesburg, has informed me that my membership of the EFF has lapsed. And I said, please be informed that I will not renew my membership of the EFF in Ward 44, which is one of the best performing wards in Johannesburg region. I also request to resign my position as Member of Parliament and all positions in the EFF. I will only do so after receiving a go-ahead from the organization because it is the EFF that deployed me to Parliament.
The political future of Shivambu is now with the MK party that he has officially joined. Out of respect for the EFF, Shivambu refused to elaborate on how and why he decided to join the MK party.
Just to give clarity so that there is no speculation, I've decided not to renew the membership of the EFF because I will join and participate in Umkhonto weSizwe party.
Malema has alerted the party's ground forces that more resignations will be forthcoming from those loyal to Shivambu.
There will be many others who are going to leave the EFF because they've got their loyalty and support to the Deputy President. So fighters on the ground should be prepared for more people to follow. And this should not serve as a point of collapse for the EFF. This is a testing moment. The organization that has lived beyond 10 years has never been through this testing moment. The EFF will have to pass this test or it will have to die.
This is likely the EFF's most challenging time since its formation 11 years ago, though Shivambu and others have been unhappy in the party for a while. Samkele Masego, SABC News, Johannesburg.
For more on this, we now speak to political analyst Sandile Swana. Thank you very much, Mr. Swana, for your time with us this afternoon. We heard there the leader of the EFF, Malema, saying that the pain of his deputy quitting the EFF for the MK party felt like hearing of the passing of his own mother. This is yet another big blow for the party. This is after them perhaps not achieving what they hoped to achieve at the 2024 general elections. What do you make of this exit and the sort of impact it's likely to have on the economic freedom fighters?
Oh, thank you so much. I think that we need to be aware that the EFF, if we're to bring the May 2024 elections into the discussion, was not even the biggest loser. The ANC was the biggest loser. The IFP was absolutely stunned by the performance of MK, and the losses of the EFF were also geographically limited, in as far as I recall. Although what they did lose was their ambition. The target that they had, they did not achieve that target. That is beyond dispute. So we need to be careful how we factor that in, because it has the potential, for instance, for people to be saying that Floyd went and sabotaged the EFF in the KZN. I don't think we have evidence of that.
Let's perhaps reflect on Shivambu's contribution to the economic freedom fighters. Of course, after Julius Malema was expelled from the ANC, Shivambu decided to follow him out, showing his loyalty very early on. And then they built together what truly has been a formidable entity. They're now 10 years old. They've shaken up the political landscape in the country. I think that cannot be denied. What now when the so-called brains in the party, the brains to Julius Malema's charisma and powerful oratorship, what happens to the party now that they're losing such a key cog in that organization?
Obviously, it's a change in the party in terms of personnel at the top, and in a party that runs elections from time to time, you would expect in any event for people to move out of senior positions, maybe just as a result of elections. Others move out because of their careers. However, if the EFF has been doing what they claim to have been doing, sending their youngsters to school to get good higher education, we should find some younger intellectuals coming to fill the gap that Floyd is leaving behind. Given also that this election and the involvement of MK party for the first time has made the EFF to realize who its target market is, and that there is a different target market between MKP and the EFF. And some of the people were in storage in the EFF. These are MK people who were there before because they could not be in the ANC. So it was just a storage facility for such people who are, in essence, a version of ANC people.
It sounds as though you're downplaying, Mr. Swana, Floyd's contribution or intellectual contribution, that is, to at least the founding of the EFF and some of the ideas he would have brought forward. Do you think perhaps too much is being made of that?
I do not downplay it. I'm talking about a format. Maybe I may be more blunt about this. It's just like I have great respect for the intellectual capacities of Thabo Mbeki in the ANC. Mm. I question deeply the fact that they have to fetch him from retirement when there's a problem, because he has not been able to produce the next round of leaders. So I am saying that if the leadership of the EFF has been grooming the young intellectuals, because it is profiling itself as an intellectual party, then when they need intellectual party, they should pull it out of the drawers, because intellectual capacity, because that's their core business. And leadership literature teaches us that a leader should never come from retirement. A leader is surrounded by deputy CEOs. The people who are there can take up the position of CEO at any time. So it would be telling that Floyd and Malema and the other senior leaders have not done their job in the past 10 years if they do not have a proper replacement for Floyd Shivambu now. That is all that I'm saying.
Yep. In a moment, we'll move to where he's headed. But let's perhaps also talk about and reflect on the dynamic between the two individuals. Julius Malema being the leader of the party, the bigger personality there. And you would have seen as well, just as the conversation throughout the country after this announcement went on, a number of people sharing clips of incidents where Julius Malema was shutting down Floyd, right, baby? Admonishing him for reading a newspaper at a presser while taking pictures with others, hitting his hand away as the leader being the person at the forefront. What do you make of the dynamic between the two? And for those who characterize it as one that was always of a leader and perhaps a subordinate, even though a senior subordinate in the context of the party, that this perhaps was a long time coming, that at some point Shivambu would have wanted to then leave and become his own person?
Well, if you have experience of leadership, whilst you may be in the same leadership team, for instance, in the ANC, you would have had a person like Naledi Pandor and so on. She's never been the president, but she has been a very brilliant person, absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
But she has probably in her own life understood that she's not the president of the ANC. So when you grow up, even when you grow up as young people, grow up as boys or young ladies, you know which role every person must play, even in leadership. So if Floyd was playful and reading newspapers when he's supposed to be concentrated, he needed to be corrected. And he knows that he needed to be corrected. And every disciplined comrade need to know that. So he cannot be holding grudges about that because he knows he's playful. If he was playful, and I have never seen those videos myself. So I think that we must not go into those personal problems or potential problems that we may not be scientifically proven.
How do we avoid the personal, though, Mr. Swana, given the very personal connection that these two individuals had? You even heard Malema saying that the EFF's constitution doesn't allow for people who've left the party to come back. But he then says with very same presser that he's prepared, in fact, to disregard that and has said to Floyd that the door is always open if he wants to come back. He's essentially disregarding the main document, right, that guides how that organization is run. And he's doing so because of the person in question here being a very close friend, a very close comrade who's essentially now left him to join the MK party.
Yes, I think it's also not wanting to diminish that Floyd is a founder and a great contributor to the EFF. The ideological question now, you must remember that Malema was not just fired also just for mischief or misconduct, and there were ideological questions that got him fired, actually. And the ANC, that is why you have this philosophy of economic emancipation in our lifetime. The very areas that got Malema fired in the ANC are still the same that the ANC has continued to fail dismally until today. Now, the question of the day, which is how I interpreted Floyd's statement from what he said, is that probably the left has now got to form a broader united front, broader than MK, perhaps broader than the EFF, and work as a broader front. And he wants to dedicate his talents to that. The people now in the EFF and the leaders in the EFF, including Malema, may not be immediately agreed to that or even pay the cost, the price of achieving that immediately. So those would be some of the differences that we will be seeing in the next 6 months as to how they take shape.
We're yet to find out what his role will be in the Umkhonto weSizwe party. He did say he's going there. He wants to, of course, put an end to any sort of speculation. He said it at that particular presser. What role do you see him playing there? We also know that the MK party has been fraught with all sorts of strange strange decisions, if you will, in terms of people being fired, brought back in and being dismissed again. The party's yet to go to its own elective conference. How does he slot in, moving from being a founder within the economic freedom fighters and coming into essentially former President Jacob Zuma's party?
Yes, obviously Floyd has got to bring in some intellectual order in the ordering of ideas in the MK party, and clean up their ideology and things like that. He's got capacity for that. He's got to bring in constitutional order and institutional order in terms of the branches, the regions, and how things are run, the code of conduct. He has experience in setting up those things which are lacking in the party, in the MK party. And he has got to clean up the running of parliament, because those people, including Dr. Hlophe, they are not experienced in how to run a successful parliamentary party in parliament, let alone be the main opposition. So Floyd can assist them a lot in those regards. And fortunately for him, he's got a very good CV of being successful in such ventures.
We'll have to park it there. We're out of time. Let me thank you for your time with us this afternoon. Political analyst Sandile Swana joining us on the line there, reflecting on the resignation of, well, now the former deputy president of the Economic Freedom Fighters. The other story we're tracking for you this afternoon is the ongoing funeral service of Zanele Mbokazi-Nkambule, who passed on earlier this week. Let's take you live to the Durban ICC, where the funeral continues.
Thank you, my love, for loving me and the children. We will be okay. We will keep your legacy alive. I will miss you for a lifetime, my love. Thank you, my love. Rest now, my darling. Rest in God's presence, my love. I will meet you in the glorious resurrection morning, my love. So hlangana engcungcutheleni yabangcwele, sithandwa sami. Fare thee well, my queen. Saze sathandana. Thank you. I know Bishop Kambulu bezothi kuzodla.
All right, we are coming out of that. That is the funeral service of Zanele Mbokazi-Nkambule. The last speaker there would have been reading a note from her husband, Reverend Nkambule. You're watching The Week in Review. We have more for you on the other side of this. Do stay with us. As South Africa marks 30 years of democracy, we'll look at some of the pieces of legislation that had to be amended to bring to life the Constitution. Parliament had to change the marriage and divorce legislation to recognize Muslim marriages. This after the Constitutional Court found that the common law definition of marriage was inconsistent with the Constitution and invalid as it excluded Muslim marriages. The advocacy group, the Women's Legal Center, successfully launched a Constitutional Court challenge which took more than 8 years. Mercedes Besant looks back on how things unfolded.
In June 2022, the Constitutional Court delivered a landmark judgment for the recognition of Muslim marriages. It declared both the Divorce and Marriages Acts to be inconsistent with the Constitution. The Divorce Act failed to make provision for the redistribution of assets when a Muslim marriage is dissolved. The court gave Parliament 24 months to rectify or develop legislation that would recognize Muslim marriages. In August 2022, the Legal Women's Center had described the landmark Concord judgment as a great relief for the rights of women in Muslim marriages.
We argued that it should apply retrospectively to 1994. However, the court indicated that it will only be by the 15th of December, so 2014, which is the date that we launched the case. What does this mean for women? It means that talaqs or divorces that have not yet gone through proceedings that have not yet been finalized by the 15th of December 2014 moving forward, can bring those matters in terms of the Divorce Act. And then in addition to that, the nature of the divorce is out of community of property, which might remain a challenge for many women. However, there is a provision 7.3 in the Divorce Act that can be used to ensure there's maintenance, in particularly post-divorce maintenance beyond the nafka 3-month period. In addition to that, equitable redress of the assets.
The National Legislature had until the 28th of June this year to meet the Concord deadline. The legislative process generated debate and panic as the process unfolded through the Home Affairs Committee in the 6th Parliament. Al-Jama believed that the Concord judgment was misinterpreted by Home Affairs.
So the Constitutional Court, the Honourable Chair, wanted immediate relief, and the department responded within a week or two with a circular. So that circular, in my opinion, misinterpreted the judgment and further harms the dignity of Muslim women who want to practice Sharia in their marriage. I don't think that was done deliberately. So we have presented a circular that will comply with the tenets of Islam and comply with the Constitutional Court.
The then Minister of Home Affairs had acknowledged the critical role played by Hendricks.
It is true that quite a number of matters have been going to court. It might be possible that because of the activism and determination of people like Honorable Hendricks, which he is, the issue of Muslim marriages and the suffering of the women there might have gained prominence more than others because those others do not have a champion. You are a true champion, Mr. Hendricks, but the others did not have.
When the Divorce Amendment Bill was signed into law by the President in May this year, Al-Jama cautiously welcomed it. It says the definition of Islamic Sharia marriage in the Act is a step in the right direction. However, the Act still poses constitutional concerns as it's not compliant with Islamic Sharia law.
Al-Jama's position is that the new Divorce Act is unconstitutional and is non-compliant with Islam. The only thing that Al-Jama can accept in the Divorce Amendment Act is the definition of an Islamic Sharia marriage, which is a good start. So Muslims are asked not to exercise their rights in terms of the amendments to the Divorce Act and wait for further changes that was promised by the Department of Justice in the next Parliament. And Al-Jama is actively involved in making changes so that the Divorce Act will be constitutional.
Mercedes Besant, SABC News, Parliament.
To this now, charges against 95 Libyans who were detained at a possible military camp in Mpumalanga last month have been dropped by the National Prosecuting Authority. The attorney, Nico du Plessis, filed an urgent requisition which prompted the withdrawal after provincial police raided a property near White River last month and discovered what seemed to be a covert military station for training Libyans. They were charged with violating the South African Immigration Act. The Department of Home Affairs will now receive the group for deportation. Melusi Xulu, a legal analyst, joins us now to discuss this. Melusi, thank you for your time with us this afternoon. The NPA took the decision to withdraw all of the charges against the 95 Libyan citizens and saying that Home Affairs will in fact deal with this under the Immigration Act. Explain to us how this will work and whether this was in fact the correct step to take.
Good afternoon to you, Sebenzile, and to the viewers at home. I believe it was the right decision to take. How it will happen is that the charges are withdrawn in court, but it does not mean that the 95 Libyans are still illegal in the country. They are still illegal foreigners because they contravened the Act, the Immigration Act, by having fraudulent visas in terms of the Immigration Act. So the next step is they are now deported. And what will happen is that the South African officials at Home Affairs will work with the Libyan officials in Home Affairs so that they can be deported back to their country because they are not supposed to be here. They are what we call prohibited immigrants. You remember that was the same process that was done for the case of Dr. Nandipa and Thabo Bester when they were in Tanzania. So it's the same thing in this context.
For people perhaps trying to make sense of this, is that if they were able to come into the country, they may be deported. What stops them from perhaps coming back again if they were able to do so? And what sort of legal steps, I suppose, should be in place to ensure that this does not happen?
Well, it's simple, Sebenzile. The fact that they came in the beginning and then they came with a visa, which was saying they're coming here to study for training, where in fact they were coming for training in a military sense, where they were found. So what happens is, if you are deported, you can come back to the country where you were deported from. But the point is, when you come back, you have to obviously have your papers in order on the second time around, because sometimes maybe you'll be convicted in court and they'll say you must pay a fine or 3 months imprisonment because you cannot be imprisoned for longer than 3 months. Then what happens is you are deported back to your country. Then you can sort your papers out and come back. Because can you imagine if you are deported and you have family back in South Africa? So obviously you will want to come back. So what needs to happen is when they come back, if anyone of them comes back, I'm sure the Home Affairs will be on the lookout. But if they come back, they just have to have their papers in order, and then they can come back in the country. But the officials, they just need to make sure that whatever they do this time around, they recheck so that they don't come fraudulently. The only thing that I'm worried about, Sebenzile, is the military training that they're doing.
Yes.
It does not make sense what exactly was happening. I think, in my view, there are some issues of national security, but the state maybe might find what really happened.
We certainly hope so, Melusi, because then the question still remains. We know now that they did not have the correct documentation to come into the country, and now it's for Home Affairs to deport the country. All right, I understand that we've lost Melusi Ulu. As soon as we get him back, we'll continue with this conversation on the story of the 95 Libyans who are soon to be deported from South Africa for misrepresenting information in their applications for visas. But of course, the question still remains about what was actually happening on that particular farm. And the NPA has said that they continue to engage the Hawks to understand who in fact was responsible for organizing, planning and financing these illegal activities. And they in fact intend to bring those people to justice. We'll try and re-establish that line. Let's take a quick break. You are watching The Week in Review. Thank you very much for staying with us. We have re-established that line with legal analyst Melusi Ulu. We are talking about the 95 Libyans who will soon be deported from South Africa. Melusi, thank you for staying with us. We're about to make the point about how, of course, questions around what exactly was happening at that particular facility, what was being done and to what end, how those questions will then be asked, because then there must still be people who need to be brought to book, who are responsible for this, responsible for the planning and the financing of those activities. Yes,
I think we need to start first, Sebenzile, with the charges that were against them, the 95 Libyans. I would look at the fact that obviously it's in violation of the Immigration Act, as I've explained. And secondly, there were firearms and, some dangerous weapons that were there. So the question is, why are they not also charged for illegal possession of those firearms that were in their possession. So those are the things that I think when I read the NPA statement on what transpired, one of the things they said, the reason the withdrawing was because I believe, I'm just paraphrasing, that the case, there was no substantive case going forward. But with regards to illegal immigration, I think it makes sense. Just deport them back to Libya. But it remains whether are there any other charges besides the issues of legal immigration, and if so, who was involved for that? Who was training them, and what was the purpose? Because the statement that I read is that they were being trained here for security as security officers. But why not train them in Libya? Because what was the purpose? So that question for me is an elephant in the room that needs to be discussed, and hopefully NPA and SAPS will be able to make us know, working with Home Affairs. But if not, the question is, does it not set a precedent for other, situations where you'll find there's a military training of some sort, and there'll always be a question, what military training is there? But I think the government officials will know, maybe they'll bring us into confidence, but it's just a question mark that every citizen will have.
Absolutely. The NPA has said that it is working with the Hawks to, of course, ensure that those who are responsible for this are brought to book. Is it plausible then that as the investigations continue that you wouldn't, in fact, need to engage these 95, to contribute to your investigation? And once they've left the country, will they still have access perhaps to get a sense of what's going on here? There was also the issue, obviously, of language as well, and not being able to communicate and engage with these 95 Libyans. How then can they, in your view, complete this investigation without people who may very well be quite critical and central to this investigation?
My view is the fact that they are being deported, if only the immigration case was the issue or cases, then it's fine. But if you're going to further investigate for what the military training that was done, if there were any issues, legally speaking, deporting them was not going to be a wise decision, because they're either witnesses or they're also accused.
Yes.
But that's why I'm saying maybe that NPA and SAPS have to, just let the public know exactly what investigation is happening and who will be charged further. But like you said, I think it's a concern that you are having an investigation, but the people who are central in the investigation, you are deporting them now again. So it just doesn't make sense. And I will predict, safely though, I'll predict that I don't think anything will come out of investigation, because you are taking the central people out of it, and if anyone was going to be arrested, I'm sorry to say it like this, but they would have been arrested at the same time when the Libyans were being arrested. So it looks like only the Libyans were selected at that time, but people were also there who were training, training, whatever they're doing, were not arrested. So for me, I can safely predict that this case is done and dusted. They're going to go back to Libya and nothing will come out of the investigation.
What message does this say, Melusi, in your view, to any other group of people from Libya or anywhere else really on the continent or globally, right? Who they're not coming here for holiday. They came here, they were busy with firearms, and then they leave and they go back to the country, and we still don't know what happened there. And anybody really who wants to come and do something in the country, clearly this says to them, come, it's a free for all here. How do we take charge and take control of this situation, so that perhaps we're then seen as a country that takes national security very seriously? It seems as though at least the message that we're getting is quite muted. No, it's all handled. Immigration Act was violated. They go home and life must continue. Surely that's unacceptable, Melusi?
It is unacceptable. Take 95 South Africans and take them to America for military training and violate their laws. That will be an issue, and it will be a national security issue at that level. So also for us, it should have been something that, I think more should have been done. It speaks to our national intelligence, but also here's a concern that I think I picked up from the beginning when these Libyans were arrested, 70. I picked up the fact that there are community members in White River or in Mpumalanga who were close to the situation. They reported this matter for some time and nothing was done. So I think the police, woke up late. I don't know why they decided to pursue the matter then, but it means that, somehow there was some influence that avoided that those arrested being done earlier. So I think we need to speak to the integrity of our government officials or the police, that when things such as this are reported, they must work faster on them, because we expect better from a national intelligence point of view and for national security. So I think it's just a warning that if we don't have our things in order, we'll have many people coming in and out doing trainings, and we'll be asleep. And the next thing that will happen is there'll be some unpredictable situations, which I cannot mention now. But I mean, it's just not, it doesn't reflect good on our national intelligence and our national security and so forth.
Far from it. Melusi Ulu, legal analyst, thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon. Of course, we will bring you updates as this particular story develops there. That was Melusi Ulu. To this now, the Manzini Magistrates Court in the Kingdom of Eswatini has granted the extradition application of Siyabonga and Malusi Ndemande. The brothers are wanted in South Africa for the murder of rapper Kiernan AKA-Tibz and AKA-Tibz Mutwane, as well as 2 others in separate matters.
The Manzini Magistrates Court said evidence disclosed by the applicants was sufficient for the court to grant the extradition. The court ordered the South African Human Rights Commission to ensure that the rights of the 2 brothers are not infringed once they are back in the country.
The evidence disclosed by the applicants as linking the respondents in the commission of the offence constitutes sufficient reason to extradite.
Magistrate Khumalo further touched on the safety of the 2 suspects, an issue the defense has been emphasizing since the case started.
Now to order the South African Human Rights Commission, acting in terms of Section 2 of the South African Human Rights Commission Act of 2013, to ensure respect, protection, and observance of the rights of the respondents as they get conveyed to South Africa.
The defense is yet to decide whether to appeal the judgment or not.
Well, for now it's difficult to preempt my take, more especially because the court did indicate that we will get the full judgment and the reasons on Tuesday. So I'll only be able to know our next step after having received the full judgment with reasons, and then having communicated with the clients, who will then instruct on the way forward after having advised.
After multiple postponements, the Manzini Magistrates Court has granted the extradition of Siyabonga and Malusi Ndemande. According to Section 10 of the Extradition Act, the defense has 15 days to appeal the judgment. If not appealed, the judgment will be sent to the Prime Minister for a signature. The 2 brothers will then be sent to South Africa to join 5 other suspects in KZN. Nhlanhla Jele, SABC News, Manzini in the Kingdom of Eswatini.
Award-winning and internationally acclaimed actor Connie Chiume has been laid to rest at the Crystal Park Cemetery in Daveyton. She passed away in hospital last week at the age of 72. The Black Panther actor was honored with a special provincial official funeral attended by government officials, musicians, actors, friends and members of the community.
A send-off befitting a person of Chiume's stature. Actors, celebrities and friends celebrated her life as they recalled the role she played both on and off screen.
We will miss your natural regal sense of confidence. We will miss your scrutinizing eye for detail. We will miss your encouragement when the morale was low, your strict sense of correction when things seemed to be going awry.
We lost a flower here who still had much to offer.
Chiume worked mostly in the South African film and TV industry. Earlier this year, she was presented with the Living Legend Award by the Sports Arts and Culture Department. She also starred in the Black Panther film and Beyonce's Black is King. To her family, she was a loving mother.
The past 3 months have been filled with anxiety and stress, creeping in day by day. 65 days I spent without you cheering me on when I get ready for castings, reading my lines with me.
She was a fighter, and as you all know, she was fighting for the industry. For me, I saw this industry from the back, if I may say. I was never in the front, but what I saw from the back, it was painful for me. I never envied the industry.
This government, for the past 5 years, they've given 1 billion for movies. 1 billion. There's not even a hit movie that came out. People have not been paid. Then you come here and you blame the government. Let them say I am lying because Kitabasapaka Twitter, you got. So in future, to tell artists, we are busy changing the funding model. No person will ever get money from the department if you are not telling us how much you're paying the actors, if you are not telling us how many people you're going to hire. We are tired of you buying Range Rovers with the money that should go to the artists.
Mam Connie, as she was affectionately known, has been applauded not only for her talent, but strength, resilience and brilliance.
Her life was a harmonious blend of passion and purpose, deeply rooted in her values and her unwavering commitment to make a difference.
Chiume's final resting place is the Crystal Park Cemetery. Mulimone Muto, SABC News, Davidton.
You're watching The Week in Review right here on SABC News Channel 404. Stay with us. We will continue at the top of the hour. Government's plans to increase nuclear generation capacity has temporarily been put on hold. The hopes of many small township entrepreneurs who stand to benefit from the township economy have been dashed. The University of South Africa struggles to restore its battered image following reports of maladministration and a witch hunt. Welcome back. You are watching The Week in Review, already in progress from our studios in Auckland Park in Johannesburg. I am Zanele Mbokazi-Nkambule. A very good afternoon to you. Remember that you can participate in the discussion. You can give us a ring. Our studio line is 011-714-0680, 0681 or 0682. Welcome. We start here this hour. Government's plans to increase nuclear generation capacity has temporarily been put on hold. Minister of Energy and Electricity, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, announced the withdrawal of the gazetted Section 34 process aimed at facilitating the procurement of nuclear energy. Earlier this year, he announced plans to procure 2,500 megawatts of nuclear power. The decision to halt the process is to allow government to consult broadly while ensuring that the nuclear strategy can also withstand public scrutiny. Government's program to invest in nuclear has long been opposed by various civil society organizations as well as the Democratic Alliance, citing high costs and the lack of public consultations.
The Energy and Electricity Minister, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, has halted the country's nuclear power procurement process, citing procedural flaws and the lack of public consultation. The program forms part of South Africa's future energy mix under the 2019 Integrated Resource Plan. According to the plan, 2,500 megawatts of generation capacity will be sourced from nuclear energy. The plan has since received the green light from NESA after initially raising several concerns before approval. That has since been addressed by government, but the minister says he's still not convinced that the case for government's nuclear build program is watertight and that his department continues to address the issues raised.
There has to be a recognition of the fact that technology in the nuclear space has evolved, and therefore the department must illustrate how they are going to take into account the evolution of that technology advancement. The second requirement was that it must further elaborate on the rationality of the 2,500 megawatts. So remember I said the determination was to procure 2,500 megawatts of nuclear capacity. And of course, in answering that question, you have to compute what we call the demand analysis. You must do a computation of what is the projected, what we call the load profile, the amount of demand that will be placed on the grid post-2030.
The minister gazetted the nuclear procurement Section 34 process earlier this year, but has had to put the brakes on the process to avoid further legal challenges as the conditions were not fully subjected to public consultation. Some civil society organizations and the Democratic Alliance took government to court, flagging cracks in the consultation processes.
They are arguing that NERSA had an obligation to subject that report of suspensive condition to another process of public participation. And on the back of that, I think that it is proper that we are able to extend an opportunity to these parties and other parties to evaluate, examine, critique, respond to our report in relation to how we are going to meet the suspensive conditions. So on the back of that, I then take the decision, and this is the announcement I'm making to the country, that I'm withdrawing the Gazette. I'm withdrawing the Gazette to allow for that public participation to happen.
At the center of this is that the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, NERSA, failed to go back to the public for views on the corrective measures that were imposed as conditions before the final approval. NERSA simply approved the matter. The minister has conceded that NERSA has capacity challenges and that the entity will have to be supported to adequately do its work.
We do guarantee that working with NERSA, the kind of capacity that is required, not just in this area and many other areas, we'll work with the chair and the CEO, collectively will build that capacity. I'm more than confident that with the leadership there at NERSA, the chair and the board and the CEO and the management team, we should be able to get this right. We'll ensure that there's some degree of investment there to allow NERSA to be able to execute more efficiently.
The minister says some of the set out targets, like the 2,500 megawatts, may be subject to change as the department works to bring integrity to the process. Energy expert Chris Yelland has raised issues with the steps to be taken, saying he's not convinced that the nuclear program should be prioritized at the moment. He's called for a study on this that will form part of the upcoming integrated resource plan.
In my view, the minister in that respect is putting the cart before the horse. Look, this new nuclear procurement is likely to result in new nuclear power coming to the grid in about 2033, 2035. And it's got a long life, 50 plus years of life. So one has to look at the need for new nuclear, not now. In fact, there is no need for it right now. The question is there a need for it in 2035 and beyond? And that depends on what is going to be built between now and 2035.
The minister has maintained that nuclear remains part of the country's energy mix to sustain the baseload energy critical for the just energy transition.
The public and rogue players have been urged to take advantage of the consultation process when that avenue opens up as government works to capacitate NERSA. The minister is hopeful that by September, all should be clear on the country's nuclear energy determination, hopeful that the parties will find each other ahead of the High Court sitting on the matter in October. Katlego Logodi, SABC News in Pretoria.
The 95 Libyan nationals are expected to be deported back to their country this afternoon. They will fly from the Kruger-Mpumalanga International Airport to Libya's capital, Benghazi. The men were arrested in July at a suspected military training facility in White River. It's believed they entered with visas obtained through misrepresentation in Libya's neighboring Tunisia. On Thursday, the White River Magistrates Court withdrew their cases. They were facing a charge of contravention of the Immigration Act. Our Tumelo Machogo is at the airport currently. Tumelo, very good afternoon to you. Take us through what's happening then, what we can expect this afternoon as these 95 Libyans are being deported back to Benghazi, Libya.
Well, indeed, you remember these men were arrested in July last month when these men were actually arrested at a military camp, a suspected military camp rather, just outside Wild River called the Military Security Services. Then they appeared in court a couple of times. You understand that the last time they were appeared in court, they were actually, court was supposed to actually appear, the court was postponed to the 26th of August, but the defense in the matter actually did an application so that the matter can be heard earlier in court. So that's why they appeared in court on Thursday. That's when the defense actually asked the state to withdraw charges against these men, and also the state saying that they do not have a strong case in this matter. So they also agreed that the case must be dropped and also must be withdrawn from the court. And that's when the magistrate then said that the men should be deported, because you remember that when these men were arrested, Home Affairs immediately suspended their visas in the country, meaning that they were illegally in the country by the time when they were appearing in court. So they had to be deported immediately after the court actually said that they needed to be the case was withdrawn. So they had to be deported within 48 hours of that, and then today they are expected that they will be flying back to their country, to Benghazi. We understand they're going to be flying from this airport behind me at the Kruger Mpumalanga International Airport. So they will be departing here at any moment. Now, they have not arrived yet, but the police are here. There's a high police presence. We see that the police are actually from the public order police are already here. So these are the people that have been monitoring them, then also monitoring their movement, especially when they were going to court and when they were appearing in court. There was always high police presence there in court. So today they already arrived here. We understand that they will be coming from the Nelspruit prison. They will come to this airport where they will be processed. We understand they will be flying around 2 or 2:30 this afternoon. That's when they will be flying. We also we've been trying to speak to the airport management and also people that are in the airport. They're telling us that they don't know anything about the flight, but they're saying that if it's a private flight, it won't be on their system. But there is information that there is a private plane that is going to land today. They don't know what time, and that plane will take these 95 men back to their country. They're expected also to go to Benghazi. You'd understand it's also a long flight, so these men are expected to come here around about 2:30, and the plane is likely to leave around about 3 o'clock. But it's going to be a long process. You understand there are 95 people that they need to be deported. So the process of them going through the immigration processes is going to take a bit of a while here at the airport.
Chiume, you would have been on the story right from the beginning as well, and have been to the camp itself. Do you have a sense of what is actually happening there? Of course, we have heard from the NPA that they're working with the Hawks. They're looking into who, in fact, should be charged for financing and planning the illegal activity that was happening at the camp. Do you have an update as to the state of that camp in White River?
Well, the camp, after the men were arrested, it was immediately closed down by the police for investigation. So that investigation is still ongoing. Police are telling us that investigation into the camp and into the owners of the camp is still ongoing at the moment. But the camp so far has already been shut down, it's been closed. And also there's SIRA, which is the private security services, has already suspended the license of this facility. So the farm and also the facility is not operating at this stage, and police are investigating that matter. They're also still investigating if they cannot charge the owners of this facility, because you understand that they misrepresented what they are doing there, because they're saying they registered the company as a security company, not a military-styled training facility.
Have the community surrounding the camp, have they welcomed this? What are their views, given where this matter is now, and that in just a little over 90 minutes, these 95 Libyans will be back home?
Well, indeed, the community, especially of Masoyi, because you understand these people, they lived very close to the Masoyi area, and about 4 weeks before they were arrested, that's when the community there started actually noticing these men walking around in their communities. Some of them are allegedly selling some of their belongings, their clothes, their shoes, and also there were cases that people in the community were talking about, that there have been a number of cases, especially of theft in the community, people's cell phone being taken away, and also these men were also being seen in the communities going to taverns, going to drinking sport, and also being seen in videos dancing in these alcohol selling places. But the community, they are happy that the men are out of their community, because you understand that no one knew that there was a military style training facility just close to their community. So they are happy that the people will be leaving the country within in the next few hours, because they have not arrived yet at the airport. So the community is happy that the men will be leaving. But the police are saying that they also agreed with the NPA when the NPA and the defense wanted to withdraw the case, agreed with them, because there were rumors that there were the cases of rape, but no one really came out to the police and say this is the person that actually allegedly raped me and all those kind of things. So they're saying that the police, and also the issues of theft and also of people's cell phone being taken away from them, no one really came to the police and actually lay a charge. So the community is happy that now these men will be leaving the country. But you can imagine also the state must be also happy that, you know, they're not going to be footing the bill for these men, because now the state had to take over. You remember when they appeared in court the second time, they asked the magistrate if they can be moved from the Barberton prison and be taken to the Nelspruit prison, because they were saying that the treatment that they are getting at the Barberton prison was unsatisfactory, and saying that actually they have not been receiving enough food, and food, especially halal food. You understand, these men are of Arab descent, so they need to eat food that is halal, and they were saying that they were not getting that in Barberton prison. That's why they wanted to be moved to the Nelspruit prison. And so, these are some of the issues that actually the defense went to the NPA and said, you know, we want these men to be, rather to you guys to withdraw the charges so that they can leave the country, and also we don't have to fight over the issues of food and the issues of treatment of these men while they're being held in custody.
SABC News reporter Tumelo Machoho is coming to us live from the Kruger Mpumalanga International Airport. We are expecting that these 95 Libyans will be arriving any minute now. They are set to fly from there to Benghazi in Libya at around 2:30. Tumelo, thank you very much for that update. We'll continue covering that deportation any minute now of the 95 Libyans. You're watching The Week in Review, the second hour of the show. Stay with us, more on the other side of this. Thank you for staying with us. To this now, the World Health Organization has declared Mpox a global public health emergency for the second time in 2 years, following an outbreak of the viral infection in the Democratic Republic of the Congo that has spread to neighboring countries. Mpox can spread through close contact and causes flu-like symptoms and lesions on the body. The outbreak in Congo began with the spread of an endemic strain known as Clade 1, but a new variant, Clade 1b, appears to be spread more easily through routine close contact, including sexual contact. It has spread from Congo to neighboring countries, including Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. South Africa has recorded 24 cases of Mpox and 3 deaths. Joining me now via Teams is Professor Adrian Purin, Executive Director of the National Institute for Communicable Diseases. Professor Purin, thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon. A very good afternoon to you. Let's dive straight into the issue at hand. Explain to those perhaps still not in the know about the root causes of this Mpox outbreak and its rapid spread, given that it's now been declared an emergency for the second time in 2 years.
Yeah, so you're quite right that there is a larger than expected outbreak, and it's affecting a large number of countries, and that makes it really rather different. But you're quite right in the sense that there has been circulation of this particular virus. It's really endogenous spread within those particular countries in Central and West Africa, where there are different clades. I just want to highlight the multi-country outbreak that started in 2022 did include South Africa, and it continued right up to this particular point. And that is caused by a different clade. So in South Africa, we have a clade 2B, which is part of that broader multi-country outbreak. So what's different in this particular and has led to the announcement by both the Africa CDC and the WHO is the fact that in the DRC, as well as around 13 or so countries, that we're seeing clade 1 and 1B in particular take off. That's not to say that 1A is not also in circulation. So it's a complex picture of these two clades. What has happened in terms of why we are seeing these large numbers of cases remains unclear. I think there's a lot of epidemiological data that still needs to be obtained to really understand what has changed around the ecology of this particular virus. Is it the virus itself? As you know, you've mentioned clade 1 specific. However, it may not be all of those particular factors, and we really need to understand what it is about the virus, what it is about the communities that are affected. And a consequence of this, of course, is that the announcement of a public health of a concern announcement is that it really mobilizes various aspects that are really required to control this particular virus and its transmission. So it's really around mobilizing resources, around human resources, epidemiological resources, for example. It's also around mobilizing, for example, access to treatments, to vaccines and diagnostics in order for us to really try and get on what is actually happening with regard to this particular outbreak.
Mm-hmm. As you say, Africa CDC Director General Dr. Jean Kaseya also declaring this an emergency. Once this declaration has been made, right, whether globally or focusing on the African continent, we know at least 13 African countries have reported cases of outbreaks this year alone as well. What sort of action should in fact follow, right? Because the expectation is that as soon as there have been cases detected, that there would already be measures and there's action in place to mitigate against any rapid spread of it. But once there has been a declaration made, how big a shift should we begin seeing in terms of making sure that the correct health measures are there to prevent a spread?
Yeah, that's quite right. So it's really around mobilizing, it's really around the coordination and an overall coordination in terms of ensuring that the countries such as DRC and other countries have the appropriate ways in which they can manage this particular outbreak. In other words, there are responses around surveillance activities that are really critical in terms of identifying cases and diagnosing those cases. I think that there's been a challenge around the diagnostics. So you'll see that there's a large number of suspected cases, but a smaller proportion of those individuals that actually have a diagnostic test. It's also around understanding the characteristics of this particular virus, what is in circulation, so again, molecular testing, for example. And then really key around the further transmission is focusing around contact tracing, for example, and ensuring that you identify and isolate individuals that are affected, and that you are able to either retrospectively or prospectively trace contacts in order that you can try and prevent further transmission. So the outcomes, and that's also really critical in this particular outbreak, is that although the cases are mild and self-limiting, that there is a larger proportion of individuals that succumb to this particular infection compared to the multi outbreak where there's the clade 2B. So again, that's really important for us, therefore, to be able to ensure that there are treatments available, the right setups within particular hospitals and clinics to manage those specific cases to try and limit poorer outcomes. And then again, the other part of this, although all these other elements around controlling further transmission is really important, the other parts, for example, could include and will include the obtaining of vaccines. And vaccines are certainly important. It certainly played a very important role in the previous multi-country outbreaks. So in this particular instance, the thought is that year 2 will be a role for vaccines to try and control this multi-country outbreak.
Prof, what
it requires really is the coordination, and therefore,
yes,
for example, Africa CDC will take a lead role in working with various countries, various organizations to try and have a coordinated response to this particular outbreak.
What have been some of the other challenges, Prof, in tracking and containing Mpox, and how can some of these be addressed? If somebody kind of thinks about what some of the challenges around COVID were, being in the same space, for example, you were able to contract it. Yet with Mpox, it seems there needs to be a great deal of proximity to somebody who in fact may have contracted Mpox. Does that make that a lot harder to try and track it?
Not necessarily. I think it's different. Certainly, it's a less transmissible virus. So we're not going to see the large numbers of cases that we certainly saw with COVID. But however, we will see and have seen in this particular instance large numbers of cases. So again, the approach that is adopted is, for example, educating the public, educating the health workers more about this particular disease, how it is transmitted, and how you can protect yourself and how you can protect your community. So risk communication is really going to be central. But as you know, that can be very challenging, again, because are you reaching the communities that you need to reach?
Yeah.
How do they receive these particular messages? And how will they respond to these particular messages? There's also, most likely, as we've seen with COVID, and in terms of this multi-country outbreak, we've certainly seen that stigmatization, the fear of stigmatization, actual stigmatization,
yes,
is also an important factor, which makes it really difficult to control. I think the other aspects, the readiness of our healthcare workers and their knowledge and experience will be very important. So again, their understanding of the disease, making sure that it's on the forefront in terms of their particular settings, to be aware of the possibilities and therefore act on it. I think medications are going to be obviously, again, very challenging in terms of what is available, how does it get important. And of course, vaccines, again, the similar sort of arguments that or debates that I see is already in circulation is that there should be a fair and equitable distribution of vaccines. But again, how does that be managed, and who are you going to target is also going to be very important in the particular settings.
Have those conversations started, Prof, about vaccine equity and access for Mpox vaccines and treatments, particularly in low-resource settings?
Yes, in fact, as I said, I'm sure that there are multiple discussions. I noticed that one of the manufacturers of vaccines said, we can do this. We can produce 2 million, 5 million doses of the vaccines, but orders need to be placed. So how is that going to be coordinated by Africa CDC, WHO, and the various countries that are affected in order that supplies can be made available? I think there has been some donations made and in fact or purposed as well for specific purchase of vaccines. But as you know, in that initial multi-country outbreak, vaccines formed a very important part of the prevention strategy. Are there stocks available that are no longer in use, for example? Can they be donated and how will they be used? So those are the sorts of discussions I think are taking place right now.
The issue of vaccine hesitancy as well, Prof, we also saw, and there's still some people as well who are hesitant, in fact, to take vaccines. I mean, is there a lot of work in that regard as well, or are we perhaps back to the place where people understand if they need to take the vaccine, they'll take it for their own well-being?
Yeah, so again, I think the experience in several of the countries, at least in Europe and the United States, although the vaccine was made readily available, the uptake was not always what was expected. So again, you're quite right. There are specific communities where it's difficult to reach for whatever reasons. As I said, it comes back to stigmatization or the fear thereof, misinformation, disinformation. So again, it's how one messages and try to reach those particular communities so that there's an opportunity for them to access vaccine. So it is a complex area, but it's part of the story. I think that although we're focusing on vaccines now, there are other specific actions that we should be taking now in terms of protecting communities.
We'll park it there this afternoon. Thank you very much for your time with us today. Professor Adrian Purin is the Executive Director of the National Institute for Communicable Diseases, the NICD. Watching the Week in Review. Let's take a quick break. More after this.
women have been given enough opportunity everywhere.
They give us different salaries, but maybe doing the same thing.
In private sectors, some companies are still stereotyped.
They try to make it equal, but it's still like going on. So
we're not given like equal opportunities in terms of underestimating of power within us.
The irony is that you'll find a female insisting on being trained by a male.
Whenever any position comes up, men are always prioritized over women.
And if we are doing the same job, that's even worse. Because we need to be very equal.
Most of our supervisors are women in our company, and it's a black-owned company.
It used to be reserved somewhere.
In this corporate world, I don't think they're being treated fairly.
At the workplace, you understand.
I'd like to see a change before my daughter turns 18.
It's been 30 years for a wall-to-wall reflection on the South African story. Join Oliver Dixon on Democracy 30, Sundays at 8 p.m. only on the SABC News channel.
Thank you for staying with us. To this now, the number of unemployed persons in the country went up in the second quarter. Stats SA data shows the official rate of unemployment went up to 33.5% in the quarter from the 32.9% in the first quarter. The expanded unemployment rate, including those that have given up looking for work, increased by 0.7 of a percentage point to 42.6%.
The local economy continues to struggle to create much-needed jobs. Employment losses were mainly in the formal sector and the agriculture sector, while the informal sector managed to create some jobs. 5 of the 10 industries shed jobs, with the largest losses recorded in trade, agriculture, private households and construction. Increases in employment were recorded in manufacturing, community and social services and utilities.
The number of those that are employed has gone down by 92,000. And the number of the unemployed, we were sitting at 8.2 million. We went up by 158,000 to 8.4 million unemployed. And that is the one that returns the unemployment rate of 33.5%.
Labour Federation COSATU says the unemployment levels show that the economy continues to struggle, despite some headway made in electricity reforms.
We've seen for the last 3-4 quarters unemployment rising by nearly 1% or 0.5% each quarter. We're now at 42.6% if you take the expanded definition of unemployment. And youth unemployment is nearly at 60%. And I think for us, we have to do something differently as a society. We can't continue to normalize a scenario where 4 out of 10 South Africans and nearly 6 out of 10 young people can't find work.
The structural constraints on the economy and the high inflation and interest rate environment could be to blame for the increasing unemployment.
The cycle isn't favorable. We've had a couple of years of inflation. We've had interest rates going up since November 2021, and it's been a fairly vicious interest rate hike. And that has been weighing on demand, especially consumer demand. So demand for private sector business is down. It is much weaker, and we're at a weak point in the cycle now, probably very close to the trough. And as a result, I think what you're seeing is that if you just look at the breakdown of these numbers, where the bulk of the jobs have been shed is actually in a very predictable space. Domestic trade, which is your wholesale, retail, motor trade, everything that depends on consumer demand.
Experts say conditions look promising going forward.
We think that the employment prospects have improved since the second quarter. We think that GDP will already be a little bit stronger in the second quarter, and generally we expect an uptrend in economic growth over the medium term. And that should be positive from an employment perspective. Having said that, at this stage, the SA consumer is still under considerable pressure, and it's only really from around the fourth quarter of this year when we think that there will be significant relief from both lower inflation and lower interest rates.
Stats SA data shows young people continue to be the most impacted by the scourge of unemployment. Compared to the same time last year, the percentage of young persons aged 15 to 34 years who were not in education or training increased by 0.8 of a percentage point to 44.2% in the second quarter. Gloria Safakomusi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Employment and Labour Minister Nomakosa Zanele has acknowledged the increase in the unemployment rate, but says there is hope. The quarter labour force survey for the second quarter put unemployment rate at 33.5%. That means a decrease of 92,000 in the number of employed persons to 16.7 million, while there is an increase of 158,000 in the number of unemployed to 8.4 million. To speak about what these figures mean and their impact on households, we're joined now by Dr. Frank Lekaba, Senior Lecturer at the Wits School of Governance. Thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon, Dr. Lekaba. Given the economic data released in this first quarter, these stats no doubt come as a surprise. Does the Labour Minister's sentiment that they still hope find resonance with South Africans given their lived experiences?
Yeah, no, good afternoon and good afternoon to the viewers at home. Yes, I think the tone of the minister's speech of hope is welcome because they are looking at factors like prospects of the cuts in interest rates. Of course, the cuts in interest rates, we know they will mean much for consumers in terms of the CPI and in terms of the purchasing power, and also in terms of the prices in the supermarkets. So there is that global expectation that there's prospects that towards the end of this year and early next year, we are going to see cuts in interest rates. So the minister, I think, is hoping, based on this, that this will have rippling effects on the economy. But I think although the minister is giving a message of hope, I think the minister is not also giving much more hope as to what they can do as politicians and what they can do to turn around the situation. I mean, we've been talking about the reform, the structural reforms, particularly within the sectors of the rail freight, to increase our exports. And we know once the exports increase, then of course it means well for our economy. So the minister is not reassuring with regards to that. It's not even giving us a hope that there is progress that is being made in this context. Therefore, it seems like the minister is hoping, putting a hope on the recovery, on the economy that is doing on its own, that is performing on its own and bringing up this positive outlook on its own without that intervention from the political elites.
What does it say then about the past administration's policy efforts in reducing joblessness?
Yeah, no, look, I think the past 5 years has been very difficult because before COVID, you would remember that we already had a recession in our economy. We had registered recession. So COVID worsened that situation, and we know what it meant in terms of employment and all of that. And I think they really tried, especially with the investors, trying to get the investors back to reinvest in the economy. Although the pledges are there, especially in the energy sector, the ICT sector, and the mining and beverage. Those are the major 4 sectors that where the pledges were made on. But we don't see the recovery in those sectors. You see, there is a disjuncture here, where the pledges that were made at this investors conference and the real numbers in the economy, we don't see a turnaround there. In fact, we see in the services economy more than these sectors where investment was made. So it takes us back to that question of the social compacting, whether the state is able to really drive all the partners that have to play a role in this social compacting? And is there that trust between the political class and the propertarian class? I mean, people who have got assets and all of that, who have the capacity to invest in the economy. That trust, it seems it's not even there. And this can be blamed, of course, on the state capture and all of that. But I mean, 5 years, we should have seen a headway in terms of repairing that trust between the propertarian class and the political elites. What I'm saying is, although there were efforts in the past 5 years to reignite investment, and the pledges were there. Of course, pledges don't mean real investment. It's pledges as it means, but there's no real impact. There's that disjuncture that you have 1.3 trillion that has been pledged, but the very same sectors that the pledges were made on, you don't see them recovering and really helping us to reduce the unemployment.
Formal sector employment, Dr. Likaba, decreased by 77,000, while informal sector employment increased by 48,000 over the same period. Is South Africa's bias towards the formal sector being indicted here as more people are forced into entrepreneurship and finding other means to make income?
In fact, if you look at South Africa and relative to the countries in the continent, our economy is formalized. We don't have so much informality as you would find in many countries in the continent. Our economy is so formalized to a point where a street vendor who sells vegetables in the street is controlled where they sell these vegetables from what time to what time. There's you know what happens in Johannesburg CBD and all of that. That is part of the control. Although there might not be regulations per se, but there is also control. So the informal sector is controlled, but it is not receiving any kind of incentive for that kind of control. And I think this now brings up a new reality. I think it's not so much a new reality, but it's what has always been said. Allow the informal sector to play a role, because informal sector, although you cannot calculate it into your GDP as you do with the formal sector, but what it will do is it helps in terms of purchasing powers in the households. It helps in so many ways, even if you may have high unemployment. But when you have informality doing well, it means there's a circulation of money, and the people that you may not necessarily count in the formal employment sector will be doing well in the informal sector.
Let's just zone in on the impact on households in the country. There are just under 2 million fewer employed women than men in the economy right now. Please reflect on how this picture should be changed or could be changed, given women in general outnumber men and there are many single women households.
Yeah, no, of course there are. I think here it goes back to the point I was making, the commitment from the political class, and I think this is where now I think support is needed that is geared towards women. And I mean, my colleagues in the space of feminist scholarship have been putting more emphasis that when you invest in women, you are investing in something that is going to give you dividends. So I think it really brings back to that picture in reality, to say the political class have to put much more effort and emphasis in supporting women to play a role in the economy. And of course, you have said about the numbers. That goes without saying that the numbers on its own then tell us that support needs to be there. But when it comes to households, there's hope, as I said when you started, that there will be a decline in an inflation. And of course, this will be linked with the cut in the interest rates, the fuel. I mean, now we saw fuel prices going down. Of course, all of this then lead to disinflation, and that is going to ease the burden on households. I mean, in terms of purchasing power and all of that, that is expected, unless something dramatic takes place.
Yeah, and then there's also the impact, Dr. Likaba, of a reduction of load shedding as well. The government is also focusing on resolving transport and logistics issues as well. As a parting shot here briefly, what in your view should be the priority of this administration to effect real structural change?
I think what you get from Treasury and what you get from government as a whole is that commitment to work around the railway. They are trying to bring in third-party players into the railway. Although I don't like that, but if it does well for the economy, why not? I mean, we know the problems at Prasa and all of that. So bringing a third party, I don't know if it means bringing a private sector to help in terms of transportation of goods and services. But that is what I'm reading from the documents in the Treasury and all of that. So what I'm saying is, if the government really press hard on all these sector reforms, and that is the first point. The second point, repair the relationship between the propertarian class. No economy in the world today can do better when there is no really that trust between the political elites and the propertarian class. Once there's that trust, and I think GNU is one of those goals that can really help to get that trust from the investors, to say, okay, now you see the hands are many in terms of how you manage the state and all of that. So they have it. It's just to press hard on the plans they have now. I think if they do that, then we'll see a recovery in the next 2 or 3 years.
Dr. Frank Likaba, Senior Lecturer at the Wits School of Governance, will park it there this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us right here on The Week in Review. More on the other side of this. Stay with us. So this now, the University of South Africa is struggling to restore its battered image following reports of maladministration and a witch hunt. Last year, then Higher Education Minister Dr. Blade Nzimande placed the university under administration. This followed the recommendation of the independent assessor, Professor Themba Musia. The damning report found serious financial mismanagement, compounded by the university drifting from its core mandate. But the minister's decision was reversed after the university took the report on review. The institution is again facing claims of a witch hunt against those who stand in the way of Principal and Vice-Chancellor Professor Buleng Linkambula.
Ranked amongst the top institutions of higher learning globally and revered for producing internationally respected academics, UNISA is scrambling to restore its image and reputation. After being placed under administration for alleged malfeasance, it's again grappling with allegations of a purge of its senior executives. The minister later turned on his decision to place the institution under administration after the university took the Musia report on review.
But that's what happens there. They will suspend you. No director was suspended, sat at home, and the contract even ended while you were sitting there, after months and months of waiting. And obviously, it wasn't renewed.
Professor Mutata held various positions at the institution for close to 3 decades. His dismissal came after accusations of sexual harassment by a former employee whose contract had since lapsed. Claims he has refused. Mutata didn't take this lying down. After he was accused, he requested that the institution investigate allegations against him. He said that the charges were concocted after he raised some concerns with the current Vice-Chancellor. To Mutata's surprise, he says the complainant later received over R500,000 payment in a form of a settlement from the institution. He believes the payment was a reward for his accuser's help to get rid of him.
This person went to the CCMA as well, contesting, the contract and saying, look, she had legitimate expectations for the contract to be renewed. But there was never any mention about that, harassment in the CCMA itself. So, and then, I don't know what the CCMA said, but what happened was that immediately, afterwards, I think it's about 4 or 5 weeks later, they started stories about harassment, which I couldn't understand, because really there was nothing. I didn't harass anyone at all. And then they gave her, I think, more than R500,000, it's about 502 502,000 rands. I wrote to council about it. I was still there at that time. I wrote to council. I said, no, but this thing it's a bribe disguised as a settlement.
Mutata also claims that there is evidence of an orchestrated plan to dismiss and purge senior staff members who question certain decisions by the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lekambula. The list of casualties are said to include Advocate Mudidi Mamanya and Dr. Leslie Ntwane, who was the director of University Estate, while Dr. Reshma Mathura sought legal help from AfriForum to contest her suspension. On the 5th of August this year, AfriForum wrote to the institution demanding the reinstatement of their client, arguing that her suspension was unlawful.
If people don't find anything to use against you, if they really want to get rid of you, and they don't find anything, they will then start manufacturing stories. And that's what happened with me.
Mutata believes that the Department of Higher Education was correct to put UNISA under administration. In June, the department wrote to the institution requesting a report from the investigations done by the university. Efforts to get comments from UNISA have been unsuccessful. Ntlanhla Khatlani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
President Cyril Ramaphosa is set to lead South Africa's delegation at the SADC summit for heads of state and government in Zimbabwe. He will be supported by International Relations and Cooperation Minister Ronald Lamola. Zimbabwe will take over as SADC chair. The SADC summit has been preceded by the meeting of senior officials and the Council of Ministers tasked with preparing the agenda for the heads of state.
Zimbabwe is a hive of activity as SADC leaders have started arriving in Harare ahead of the 44th Ordinary SADC Summit. Tanzanian President Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan has landed at Robert Mugabe International Airport alongside Malawian President Lazarus Chakwera and Namibian President Nangolo Mbumba. The gathering will focus on the promotion of innovation to unlock opportunities for sustained economic growth and development towards an industrialized SADC. Harare has come under immense pressure as its poor human rights record came under the spotlight, with some saying the summit should be moved to another country. Some civic society organizations meeting in Harare wants a revival of the SADC Tribunal or the formation of a new entity which should be mandated to hold member countries accountable for their actions. They feel that member states continue to violate the SADC Treaty at will with no repercussions. The SADC Tribunal was disbanded by the regional bloc in 2012 at the behest of former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe.
Now you must remember, one of the key institutions that SADC had was the SADC Tribunal. Okay? So instead of SADC countries accusing each other, there's this not very pleasant fracas between Zimbabwe and Zambia. Now, if you had a SADC Tribunal, right, and Zimbabwe was unhappy about the SIOM report, they could go to the SADC Tribunal, okay, and say, we want to present an argument about why this report is wrong. Right? Very nice. It's an impartial body made up of judges. SADC got rid of it. Why? Because it was proving embarrassing to individual countries. Right? So they decided, no, we don't want a tribunal. South Africa found out that their constitutional court ruled that they unconstitutionally withdrew from SADC. Now, if we are serious as SADC as a region, recreate an impartial judicial body where if you've got a complaint about a neighbor, like they violated the treaty, you can go to them and say, we want a judgment about whether this election in Zimbabwe or Swaziland, Madagascar, who cares where, violated the treaty. Can you please tell us? So you can put flesh on the bones of those things. That's the critical thing. But they've got rid of the body, and that's because they fear accountability. That's my view. So they don't want to hold each other accountable. They're just happy with the arrangement. You've got some high-flying rhetoric. The reality is very different.
Meanwhile, the SADC leaders will focus on peace and security, especially in eastern DRC, the political situation in Eswatini and other hotspots in the region. Kylie Kumalo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And that's it for today's installment of the Week in Review. Thank you very much for joining us. Do join us again tomorrow at noon, where we'll bring you the week ahead. The news right here on SABC News, channel 404, continues at the top of the hour. From myself, Zanele Mbokazi-Nkambule, and the entire team here at Studio 11, until next time, take care.